Hey friends, I'm so excited to share today's interview with you. We are talking to New York Times bestselling author and neuroscientist, Lisa Genova. Lisa has written a new book called More or Less Maddy, which is about bipolar disorder. If you follow Lisa's work, you know that in her book, she covers neurological disorders and conditions to create awareness about those conditions and empathy for the people and their families who are navigating them. And this book covers bipolar disorder, a mental health condition, which there's a lot of stigma and shame around and a lot of misconceptions. In this conversation, you're going to be learning a lot about bipolar disorder, how it shows up, what the treatments are, how many people it impacts, and more about Lisa's creative choices in terms of the characters and why she chose bipolar for her latest book. Lisa is one of my all-time favorite guests. She was the very first guest on this podcast. She always brings so much heart and knowledge to the conversations, and I just adore her. So I'm super grateful for her to be back on. This is the fourth time. I'm going to list in the show notes over at thegoodlifecoach.com, or just look right on your podcast player right now. In the show notes will be a link to More or Less Maddy, Lisa's latest book, which we're talking about today. It's so good. I highly recommend it. You will love it. And all of the other interviews that we've done together. There's also an invitation to join my newsletter list, and I'd love to have you be a part of the community. Just a little bit about Lisa for those of you who may not know of her work. She has her PhD in neuroscience from Harvard University. She is the New York Times bestselling author of the novels Still Alice, Left Neglected, Love Anthony, and Inside the O'Briens. And Still Alice became a major motion picture that won Julianne Moore an Oscar. Lisa's first work of nonfiction is a book called Remember, The Science of Memory and the Art of Forgetting, which became an instant New York Times bestseller. You're going to learn so much from this conversation, and I'm so excited to share it with you. So on that note, let's get right into the show. Here we go. Hey, friends, welcome back. I can't believe I'm sitting again with Lisa Genova. We're sitting with her latest book, More or Less Maddy, which I just finished. And this book is such a page turner. Lisa, you are such a beautiful writer. And this one in particular, I literally could not put it down. I was so invested in all these characters and what was happening. And I just want to say congrats and that everyone needs to go get a copy of it.
Oh, Michelle, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be sitting here with you as one of my very first interviews for this book, which I'm so excited about. So thank you very much.
Oh, that's fun. I didn't know that. And also, just for context, Lisa was my very first interview on the podcast 6 years ago. So welcome back, my friend. I'm so happy to have you here sharing.
6 years.
6
Look
years.
at you still going. Oh
I'm
my
still
gosh,
going because I love it so
amazing.
much. Well, and I get to meet amazing people like you who are doing important work in the world. And I just always think about you in particular. Like, I just feel like you're so on path. And a big part of my show is like an invitation to really embrace what makes you unique and put that out into the world in whatever way that shows up. And your books cover neurological disorders. And in this particular case, you tackled a mental health. Is it considered an illness? I want you to say it because I know there's like a lot of stigma and there was a reason, but you covered bipolar disorder. So why did you choose that for this latest book?
Yeah. And so you touched on something that I really want to talk about. So yeah, I write stories about people living with really anything going on from the neck up, right? My background's in neuroscience. So any sort of neurological disease, disorder, condition, because those folks tend to be ignored, feared, misunderstood. There's lots of taboo, stigma, shame, alienation, otherization. If you've got something going on, like if I don't understand what's going on with you because you've got something going on with your brain, then I'd look away. I go the other way pretty quickly. And I've found that stories are a way in. Like stories make these conditions, these lived experiences accessible to anyone, right? I'm not going to pick up, if I don't have bipolar disorder or if it's not in the life of someone I know and love, I'm certainly not going to pick up the Journal of Neuroscience. I'm probably not going to pick up a memoir, but I might read a novel. I might watch a movie. So stories are a way for us to become familiar with something we might otherwise not know anything about, and it's a path to empathy. So now I can feel with you. I can be comfortable with what's going on with you. I won't turn my back on you. And I knew that, I've written about neurodegenerative disease. I've written about brain injury. I've written about neurological conditions, disorders. I hadn't yet tackled anything categorized as mental illness. Now, I picked bipolar because I think it's hiding in plain sight everywhere. There's just so much shame. People don't know how to talk about it. And I think that it could really use some light shine on it. So it's so interesting that, we always tend to think that we're like at the moment we're living in the time of enlightenment, right? Like everything is like modern and as it should be, but we really are at a moment in time with especially diseases and disorders of the brain. Like historically, like if you had something that we call a mental illness today, people in the past thought you were possessed by the devil, or that you were a witch, or that you had a wandering uterus and your uterus had like attached to another organ, and that was the problem. We just had to like get your uterus to migrate back down to where it belongs. This was believed by the current thought leaders at the time. And so here we are today, and we call things like bipolar disorder, depression, schizophrenia, anxiety disorders, we call them mental illness. But this is just a made up categorization. And I don't know that it's useful, right? Like, so we don't call Alzheimer's disease a mental illness. And now there's still stigma attached to having Alzheimer's, or say Parkinson's or Huntington's. But I think there's an additional level of taboo with mental illness. I think there's an additional level and burden of distrust and fear and dismissiveness. Yeah,
Yes.
You're nodding. And I just wonder if there's, and I don't have the answer, but I'm hoping to invite the conversation where, like, can we do better? Is there a better word for this? Maybe we eliminate mental illness and we call it a neurological condition. I don't know. Maybe we call it a mental health disorder.
Right.
I don't know the language yet, but I do know that language matters. And in all the listening that I've done and doing the research for this story, and in all the reading I've done, and then the writing of it, I don't know that mental illness serves us. So just putting that out there.
I agree with that. And I'm just going to read actually. So your main character is a comedian. And then in the beginning of the book, there's a quote from Taylor Tomlinson, which I learned from your book is also a comedian.
Yes.
It says, I don't think anybody should feel bad if they get diagnosed with a mental illness because it's just information about you that helps you know how to take better care of yourself. And I thought that was really beautiful, especially having read the book.
Yeah. I mean, it is that. It's like our brains we're born with the brains that we get from mom and dad, right? We've got like the genetic code that determines sort of how our brains work by default. And then there's our lived experience, which interacts with all of the neurochemicals and the neurotransmitter signals in our brains to modify how your brain works.
Yes.
Everybody's living with a different set of what we could call conditions. We could label everything. We could call right? Like how we handle things. And then what normal is so subjective. That was something else that really came clear in the book, like in doing the research and just in thinking about it. It's, what is considered normal in, for example, Las Vegas would not be considered normal in suburban Connecticut versus maybe the south of France or Asia, or like culturally normal is different, right? And so behaviors that would be appropriate in one setting are not in another. So it's so subjective, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was interesting going through, seeing everything unfold through Maddie's eyes, her experiences and her perception of her family members and how they were relating to what was happening to her, and the shame or the different emotions that she would feel. But before we dive into it, I actually want to can you just define what is bipolar disorder for anyone who's unfamiliar with the term, or what is it?
Yeah, so bipolar disorder results from an impaired ability for the brain to regulate things like mood, energy, sleep, and thought. But it's primarily mood is like the
Hmm.
big symptom. So you're the deregulation is that it can swing what we call manic. So you'd have a revved up, um, everything's revved up. Your thinking, your speaking, your ideas. We call it a flight of ideas. You're probably not sleeping very much, and you're not tired. You've got bundles of endless energy, and you apply that to all kinds of exciting projects, and you're really good at everything, and you've got a lot of charisma and ideas, and it's everything's very exciting. And this energy, while it like, sounds fabulous at first, but it can be non-productive. So you might have a lot of energy for starting projects that you're actually not even very good at, or you start them and you don't finish them, or you start to develop delusions, and you can have psychotic symptoms where you believe things that aren't real. So your thoughts become detached from reality. You might be behaving recklessly, so you feel invincible, and so you might be spending tons of money, or having multiple sexual partners, or taking all kinds of risks that can lead to you losing your job and losing your relationships. So manias can ultimately be very destructive to a life. And on the other end is depression. So
Hmm.
the mood regulation that breaks and it goes in the other way, where you lack energy. You don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to do anything. You feel a constant sense of hopelessness and despair and worthlessness, a heaviness, loss of appetite, loss of interest in anything that used to bring you joy. It's awful. So it's not an easy disorder to live with for sure, especially if left untreated and unmanaged.
Okay. And how is it diagnosed? Because you mentioned some stuff and there's some things I don't really want to give away anything in the book, so we can always edit something out. But there's the main character does have some, she has some depression. She goes on an antidepressant. She goes off by itself, and then a manic episode triggers after that. And I just was a little confused. Like, so do those, did that somehow tip something in the brain, or would it have happened anyway? Like, what is going on?
Yeah, so she's a young person. She's 19, 20 years old. Bipolar disorder is typically begins in adolescence, late adolescence to early 20s. So she's right in line there. She is experiencing some depression that seems like she had been previously, but she had been experiencing a breakup. She just started school and hadn't really found her friends yet, and was a little overwhelmed, and it was harder than high school. So she's just stressed and thinks like, well, I don't know, I guess this is just I'm depressed because the situation is depressing and the world is depressing. But then she gets back together with her boyfriend, and she's kind of got a handle on things, but she's still feeling really bad. Um, and so at this point, she's presenting with depression. And when she goes to seek some help for this, she is prescribed an antidepressant. If her brain were just dealing with unipolar depression, um, she would not have swung manic. She would not
She
have this.
wouldn't.
No, but
Okay.
if what is going on inside your brain is bipolar disorder, then taking an antidepressant will actually be the catalyst that causes you to have your first manic episode.
I see.
So without the antidepressant, she might not have had that manic episode then. Something else might have caused a manic episode at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Like if she had suddenly just, like say it's finals time and she's like, oh, I have to pull a bunch of all-nighters to study. Well, a lack of sleep like that could trigger a manic episode.
Yeah.
Sleep is a very big deal if you have, for all of us, by the way, but it's
Yes.
if you have bipolar disorder, you're more sensitive to sleep. It's more critical because a disruption in sleep, like really disrupting your sleep, can be both a trigger for the disorder, and it's also a symptom once you've got it.
Yes.
So yeah, so she goes on this antidepressant, and whew, she is just slingshot into her first manic episode. nobody sees this coming. And so then in terms of being diagnosed, so the manic episode sort of runs its course, and I will not give away, but there's a
No.
big crisis moment that happens. It's sort
Page
of
turner like crazy.
it was page turning to write it. I was
Yes,
breathless as I was writing it.
I
I was
can imagine.
as a writer, I mean, it's certainly not fun for anyone who goes through it, but as a writer, it was I don't know if fun is the right word, but like the guardrails are off, which is, I imagine, what goes on inside yourself too, if you're manic. From the people I came to talk to
Yeah.
and doing the research for the book, I came to know 9 people with bipolar disorder, and then also talked to their families and other people who know people with bipolar. But the guardrails are off, and there's no rule. There are no more manners. There's no more, like, everything is possible, and it's fast and it's energetic and it's bold. And like, as a woman, to be able to feel that way kind of felt fun to write it. But then it goes too far. So she ends up hospitalized, and then she ends up with a psychiatrist who's asking questions to sort of figure out what's going on with her. And this is where we're at today in 2025, right? A moment in time where we don't have a blood test, we don't have a brain scan. The way we diagnose bipolar today is through conversation. It's exclusion of other things. Like, they check to see, are there any substances of abuse in her system? Like, is she on cocaine? That could explain this situation, maybe. But they get the history, they get her family history. Bipolar disorder is not 100% genetic, but it does have a genetic predisposition. So if the statistics go, like, if I have bipolar disorder, then each child that I have has about a 10% risk of having it as well, which is higher than the general population.
Okay.
So there's some genetic component. It does tend to run in families. You'd see it in that kind of history taking, but it's a conversation, is the diagnosis. So you can see how down the road, so if you're Maddie and you're diagnosed with bipolar disorder and you end up having to take some medications that have tons of side effects, aren't so fun to be on it, but it's been some time, maybe months go by, and you're like, do I really have this? Right? Maybe I was just overwhelmed and stressed, and I had a bit of a breakdown, but like, do I really have something that I have to take these medications for forever? Like, I don't know. I don't know if I buy that. Let me try going off these meds. I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, the diagnosis is it's a conversation. So it sounds like, it's maybe there would be lots of misdiagnoses. It's actually very easy to spot. Like, the symptoms are very clear.
Yeah,
like,
let's talk about some of them. Yeah.
Yeah, well, like we already did. Like, so she's, so for Maddie, like, she was texting everybody all night long because she's not sleeping. So if you have a loved one who's like suddenly like texting or posting to Instagram stories all night long. So you wake up in the morning and she's got like, 40 stories posted, and like your text is just like, oh my God, I've got 27 messages from my sister. And they seem like frantic or breathless or too excited, right, about something that doesn't quite make sense. If somebody's suddenly blowing a lot of money or just behaving in an erratic, risk-taking way, the mania becomes it's talking really fast. It's just not sleeping. The person's not sleeping and they're not tired.
And then the depressive symptoms. Now, Maddie was cutting as well, which, I'm wondering, are there other issues? You're saying this happens often to like teens or people in the early, that they're dealing with some mental health issues. And so I'm just wondering if there's any other things that look similar. And so the psychiatrist or psychologist really needs to like delve into it. Or is it the manic piece? Because that seems...
So to be diagnosed with bipolar 1, so this is bipolar that has mania with psychotic symptoms. So mania with delusions or hallucinations or hallucinations. You need to have a manic episode that it will last for, I think it's like a week or 4 days or a week, but like you have to have had something that's considered a manic episode to be diagnosed with bipolar 1. Bipolar 2 means that you have something called hypomania, which is mania without the psychotic symptoms. It's kind of like mania light. You're, have a lot of energy and grandiosity and exuberance, and you have a ton of energy to do a ton of things, but you aren't delusional or hallucinating. It's
Okay.
not quite as extreme. And you have a depressive episode that so you have to have depression and hypomania to be diagnosed with bipolar 2. You only
Okay.
need to show the mania to be diagnosed with bipolar 1. You will have depression. It's just that oftentimes people have, like we started talking about, you have depression, you haven't had your manic episode yet. So a lot of people will go a long time thinking they just have depression before they realize someday when that manic episode happens, like, oh, actually, this has been bipolar the whole time and I didn't know. But the cutting can happen. That was common in the people I talked to and in the research I did. That tends to happen when people are depressed.
Yeah.
So depression is so painful, and it's not just a psychogenic pain. It's a physical pain.
Mm.
It's you can't see it, but it feels very physical to me. I'm in so much pain, and the cutting is it's a way of sort of making the pain manifest. Like now I can see it and it feels like a relief somehow.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about it feeling like this, it's like a pressure release.
Mm.
And then there's the knowledge of, well, I know I'm not supposed to be cutting myself, so now I feel ashamed afterward. But there is that sort of compulsiveness that this is going to feel better, and I need the relief for a minute. And it's depression. The depression's so intense and painful.
Mm. And how many people are diagnosed in the US? Do we have a number?
Yeah, there are some numbers out there. They range from like 6 million to 7 million people in the US. It's about 2 to 3% of the population are the
Okay.
numbers that I see. So about 1 in 50 people. But I have to imagine that those numbers are highly underrepresentative of what's actually out there because, like, and my character is a great example of this. You have to live a somewhat privileged life to get a diagnosis, right? You have to be in a situation where if you have this wild manic episode that maybe someone calls the police, you're actually sent to a hospital and not to jail,
Yes.
right? To begin with. And
Yes.
then you have to have
Yep.
a family who has health insurance who can navigate the healthcare system enough to get you in front of a good psychiatrist who's
Yes.
going to give you the right diagnosis. So I gotta, and there's just so much stigma attached to it that a lot of people I would imagine would avoid, going to see someone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because even for the character, like it was hard for her to really own that this was the situation. She takes us through the process but then she's also like, I am not bipolar disorder. I'm living with bipolar disorder, right? There's an
Yeah, it
important
takes her a
distinction.
while
Yes, it
to
takes
get
her the whole
there.
book.
And I think that and I think that's like a journey that most people take, whether we're talking bipolar or Alzheimer's. I did that with Alice and still Alice. You get hit with this diagnosis, and it's especially if it's something going on in your brain, right? Because the
Yes.
brain is so much of who we think we are, right? Who we believe is mediated by neurological events in the brain, right? The underpinnings are in our brains. And so if I am diagnosed with something like bipolar disorder, the language is often, oh, I'm bipolar, right? Oh, did you hear? Like so and so is bipolar. Or people will even say it, you're bipolar. It becomes a crisis of identity, right? Like,
Totally.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
well, and it's so hard because the age of onset is typically at the age when you're just stepping into adulthood. You're just getting a chance to sort of figure out who you are in the world and what you want to do and who you might be. And your identity is so nascent, if formed at all yet. And in
Totally.
swoops this diagnosis that's so massive and so chaotic and can really take over. And it's like, okay, now this is who I am. And so for a while, I think Maddie sort of succumbs to that. Like, oh
Of
my God,
course.
this is who I am. And like, can I trust myself ever again? Will anyone ever trust me? Is this all I'm ever going to be? Um, and then, of course, through her journey, she figures out how to live with this in a way that it doesn't, it's part of her, but not all of her. And how to live with it and how to even use it to contribute to who she wants to be and what she wants to do.
And is that where the title came from? More or less Maddie?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like, and that when she's manic, there's, she's more. And then when she's depressed, there's less. There's this sense of like, but she's essentially her. Like this is, all of her life experiences and all of who she is part of her. And those parts all deserve a place.
Totally. And tell us about the treatments. So you're saying, it's a conversation and then there's diagnosis.
Yeah, the treatments are hard. I developed a an appreciation for how hard the treatment is through the course of this research. So all of the drugs used to treat bipolar disorder were not designed for bipolar disorder. Okay.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
they are all serendipitously discovered drugs for other illnesses being applied to bipolar disorder. And so because we don't understand the neurological underpinnings of bipolar disorder, and these drugs are acting on receptors that are all over the brain, it's very non-specific, right? So we don't have like a specific target. These drugs are not elegantly designed for this condition.
Yes.
And so it's like you can think of, instead of like a single gunshot, we've got like a gun spray. We've got a gun, like it is, you're activating too much of the brain. You're getting tons of side effects is the problem.
Mm.
So you are getting, the side effects are, so that you want, people on bipolar disorder are on drugs called mood stabilizers and antipsychotics to begin with. But then other drugs can be added. So there's often a cocktail of drugs.
Yeah.
And the symptoms range from hand tremors, weight gain, acne, nausea, foggy thinking. It's hard. And so the appreciation I gained, one of them is that I think that there's this sense out there when you know of someone with bipolar disorder who's having an episode, typically say like a manic episode, like they've just gone off and done something wild and chaotic and blown up their lives.
Yeah.
And so someone's relaying the story, and then there's sort of this pause and this sort of like, yeah, they went off their meds. And then the judgment is, oh, well, then they brought this on themselves.
Oh.
It is. I've heard it.
Oh.
I'm sure you have too.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, for sure.
Like
For
what do you
sure.
like if they won't help themselves, then what are we gonna do? And so I hope that this story, both within the story and then opening up a conversation, invites more grace and compassion around how difficult it is to stay on the meds. First of all, so one, it's like over and over, I would hear from people at times in their journey, they would say, you had to wonder if the symptoms of the side effects of the drugs they're taking to treat their illness were worse than the symptoms of the illness itself.
Wow. That's
Yeah. So it's like,
significant.
what am I doing? I'm taking these meds, are making me sick. I'm sick every day from this. Like maybe dealing with the illness is better because you're not manic or depressive all the time, right? So like
Right.
most people are about, if you did it statistically, if you took a year, like 33% of the time depressed, maybe like 10% of the time manic, and the rest of the time in a steady state
And they
functioning
don't know
fine.
why. And they don't know why, right?
Well, we don't know why you have this, but like we
Right.
can, like once you know you have this, you can, sometimes things are going to happen and you don't see it coming and there was nothing you could do about it. Others are like the season changing can have something to do with it.
Totally. Like you
As
said,
it
or
starts to get
sleep.
dark, if your sleep, oh, I just took a transatlantic flight and like, uh-oh, like you're right. If I start to not get sleep for some reason, I don't address it. If I start to notice that I'm not requiring sleep and I'm up late, if I'm taking drugs or drinking alcohol, if I'm using substances that affect mood and deregulate mood, right? If I'm taking a stimulant or a depressant, that could tip the scale and whew, off I go in one
Sure.
direction.
Yeah.
So there are ways to predict whether this is happening, whether I might get deregulated or not. But so yeah, so the side effects can be horrible, and so
Mm.
that's a reason to try going off. Another is like, say I had like my last, say I had one manic episode in my life, like Maddie. She's had her first manic episode. She's 19 years old or 20 years old, and she had been really stressed about school and she hadn't been sleeping.
Totally.
And it's been many months have gone by. She's taken these meds, which are horrible. You don't actually lay down memories well while you're manic. Your brain can't consolidate what's going on into lasting memories very well. So your memory of the episode will be spotty at best to begin with. And so
That's
now you're like,
important.
yes. So now you're like, well, was it really that bad?
Yeah.
Like, and like maybe did everybody kind of overreact? Like, did I really need to get hospitalized? Like, yeah, I know I kind of lost it a little bit, but I was just really overwhelmed and stressed. And this they diagnosed this based on what? There was no blood test or brain scan. Like maybe that doctor didn't really know what he was talking about. I'm fine. I mean, other than the side effects, I feel fine. I'm gonna try, you know what? I'm gonna stop taking these pills and just see how I do. Makes total sense to me.
Total sense. Total
Yeah.
sense. Of course.
Yeah. So so I think that alone is lovely to know because it just allows us to have a softer, kinder reaction when we come across this. Like, oh, somebody went off their meds. It's like, yeah, okay, I can understand that.
Totally. Totally. And I would
Yeah.
probably do the
And
same thing as well.
and then
Like,
how are they now, right? Like,
right. And how are
how can
they
I
now?
support? Right.
I can't help but thinking, like, just you're saying, this will create some awareness. This is going to create so much awareness. And I think I'm curious because I know it comes out. So we're recording, it launches, it'll be out on the 14th. This interview will air on the 15th. Have people read it who have bipolar disorder? Like, I'm wondering, like, what reaction or feedback you've gotten because this is going to change the conversation. Nobody's talking about it. Everybody, like you said, there's a stigma and shame, and people don't want to acknowledge it. They want to sweep it under the rug. They'd rather stick a label and just ignore it. And now you've shed all this light on it through this beautiful story. So
Yeah.
you've changed the conversation. Like, this is one of the most, all your books are important, but like this one, I was like, wow, like this is going to change so many lives, Lisa.
Oh,
You must feel
Michelle,
that.
you just gave me like full body goosebumps. I
No, but
hope
it's so true. Like, I
so.
was
I
like,
hope this helps. Yeah.
oh my God, I'm not going to spoil the ending, but I just like tears flooding. I was like, oh my God, like this story is just unbelievable. It's so good. It's
In a
so
good way.
beautiful.
Good tears,
And
people. Good
good
tears.
tears. No, it was happy tears,
Well, because
actually. It
this
was
is
happy tears.
thank you.
Yes.
Because thank you. This is a hard journey. Like and you know me from all my books. Like my goal is to tell the truth under the imagined circumstances. So I'm
Right.
gonna try to tell you a good and hopeful and a story that's dignified and respectful of the experience and the human condition. But I'm also not gonna pull any punches. I'm gonna unflinchingly give you what happens. I'm not gonna,
Sugarcoat. Yeah.
Pollyanna this or
Yeah.
sugarcoat it. Yeah. But yeah, so the journey can be, hard and there's some, tough moments in this book for sure. But I think I give you a really good ending for her. And I also made her an aspiring stand-up comedian.
That's what I wanted to talk about next. Okay,
In
let's
part
transition.
because I
Because
wanted to like
why?
give some well, because I wanted to give some levity to this story because I think
Okay.
it could use it at times. But also getting back to this idea of like a normal life. So, as a young person, and my oldest is 24, my youngest is 14. I've got a son who's going to be a senior, like the young people in particular. And I remember being there where it's like you're stepping into adulthood and the whole world, the culture, everybody's basically telling you need to pursue a normal life. Like you
Right.
need to go to college, you got to get a job and get married, buy a house and have kids. Like this is the life. This is what you have to sign up for. And all the pressure that comes with that. And but that's made up, right? So normal is made up. And what if my main character, in addition to having bipolar disorder, doesn't want the normal life? What if she wants something outside of that? Maybe wants to pursue a dream and a career that might be considered by people who love her and care about her well-being as that this pursuit would be considered unstable.
Yes.
Um, and so I liked that. I also liked the idea of if you're a stand-up comic in a very public way, you're kind of experiencing in sort of a microcosm the swings of bipolar disorder on stage, right? So if you're killing it and everybody's laughing and you're feeling connected and it's like the comedians I interviewed for this book all say it's like the biggest high. It's so euphoric. It's the best feeling. You want to chase it and have it again. So that's like mania. And then if you're bombing and none of your jokes are landing and everybody's got their arms crossed and nobody's laughing, you feel so alone and devastated and isolated and just like awful. Like you just want to die.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, hi, that's depression. So I just like the metaphor of what comedians experience on stage as like being relatable to the bipolar experience.
I love that you do that with your characters, like with ALS, he was a pianist. Like there's always these deeper layers of meaning, which I so appreciate throughout, like weave through. I'm like, that's what's
Yeah.
so genius about your writing. Tell us about the research because I guess you tell us just, I'll leave it there. Tell
All
us
right.
about the research.
All right. So I did interview a lot of comedians, and from like the very successful, famous to folks who are just starting out who you don't know. So I interviewed Amy Schumer and Maria Bamford, and Maria Bamford was a 2-for-1 because she also has bipolar disorder.
Okay.
And then let's see, Marsha Belsky out of New York. She is a comedian. She's got the 100 tampons skit bit. If you guys don't know that, Google Marsha Belsky 100 tampons. Hysterical.
Okay.
Shayma Tash. She's a comedian in Las Vegas. So she's like a resident comedian there. She does like several hundred shows a year or something.
Yeah.
A guy in New York, Matt Pavich, who's like sort of in the earlier stages. I saw him at the New York Comedy Club randomly,
Fun.
and he was emceeing the night. And he happened to mention he has bipolar disorder. So I chased him down and got to know him. Like, you're my main character. So I interviewed lots of comedians. My friend Erica Forensic, who was a comedian in the Boston scene in like the 80s, early 90s. And she
Cool.
knew like, yeah, a ton of guys. My friend from high school, Janine Driver, who was a comedian in New York early years. So did that. And then I took a stand-up comedy writing class because I knew I had to write some of Maddie's
I was
stand-up.
going to
And
ask
that's a
you, did you write those
Yeah.
jokes?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you think maybe I didn't. I wrote those. Yeah. So I took a stand-up comedy writing class and then I did a 5-minute set.
That's
And it
so
was
fun. I've actually
was
wanted
really
to do
fun.
something like that just for the, I don't know, just for the
It was
creative
fun. It's
pursuit.
hard. It's
Oh, I can imagine.
hard in a good way. It's funny when I signed up for the class, I had this little speech prepared. I'm like, well, I'm taking this class, but like I'm taking it as my character. So she's 20 years old. She's an NYU student. So like I'm gonna write all the jokes as if I'm her.
Cute.
And that no, but the teacher was like, no, you're not. He's like, you
He
have
made
to do
you
this
do it
as you.
based on your, oh,
He's like,
that's
you
so
have to do it as
good.
you, and then you have to trust that what you have learned you can apply to your character, which was the absolute right thing to tell me. But it was not what I wanted to hear because I was like, oh shoot, now I have to be really vulnerable and
I
like come up
love
with
that so
my
much.
own 50-something-year-old woman jokes. Like, okay, craps.
Oh my God. I love it. I
Yeah,
love
but it
that.
was a great learning experience, and it really helps because I knew that I wanted Maddie A to discover her comedy, so there had to be something in the beginning that was good but not great, and then she had to get better. I also had her bomb when she was in the middle of a manic episode in Nashville, which was like cringy to write, but also fun. And then I knew I wanted her to end with a 5 minute, essentially what would be a 5 minute set that should be really good and be about her accepting herself with bipolar disorder and sharing that with the crowd and making them comfortable with her sharing it.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you did such a beautiful job too, on top of all that, with all of the other characters in it. Max, the other comedian, like the different people that she's interacting with, because you learn so much about like every element, like even just the comedy and like what's important and the vulnerability and the advice he gives at the end. Like it's just like the way you weaved it all together. I was like, how did she do this? Like it's just so good.
Thank
It's
you.
so good. Oh my gosh. So
Oh,
you had
Michelle,
fun with the
thank you.
comedy. You had fun with the
I
comedy.
did. I had a
You want to
lot of
do it
fun with the
again?
comedy. The stand-up, no. No, but I really love comedians. I have a
Me
whole new
too.
appreciation for how brilliant they are and like the writing and then the performance of it, the timing and the artistry of it. And I pay attention to that when I go see them and I just like have so much love for them.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking to you right now from New York City, and I went and saw Gary Gulman last night perform his grandiloquent show. Um, so yeah, I love comedians. I'm like so happy to have discovered this. I always liked them, but now it's like I'm in. Like I have tickets already to see Murray Bamford in March, Nikki Glazer in
Oh, she's
February,
so funny.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And you know what I always think about comedy, though, too, is that it also connects us to our humanity, which is what your
yeah,
work does. So the fact that Maddie is a comedian is sort of perfect for this book because it's like it's
yeah.
also another layer to your work, which I so, so appreciate. The mom character, my heart, I think, was just like so with the mom character.
I love that.
Um, yeah,
I'm so
she's
glad. Because yeah, the mom, oh yeah, I have so much empathy and compassion for mom. Like, and there were a couple of reviews where people were like, oh, I was frustrated with the mother. hmm And I
interesting.
get that. Well, because the mother, like, she doesn't want this diagnosis for her daughter at first, which made sense to me. Like, she's like, no, this can't be right. Like, she's normal. She's a teenager.
Oh,
Teenagers are moody. Please don't slap this label, this diagnosis on my beloved child, right? Like, please don't say this so. And then, by the way, like, we learn, maybe I shouldn't give this away, but
yeah,
like,
don't give, okay. Yeah, yeah,
this,
you
like, there's
can.
a family history here that Maddie
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
know about. And so because Maddie doesn't know about it and we're in Maddie's point of view, it takes us some time to maybe appreciate that, like, oh, mom's lived through this before and she knows how difficult and how disruptive and destructive it can be. And she does not want that for Maddie. So there's some reluctance and denial at first, which Maddie interprets as my mother just wants me to be perfect. And
Seeing it through the 20-year-old eyes. Yeah.
she can't stand anything unless it's perfect. Um, but mom is just really concerned about her daughter
Yeah.
and is unwavering in her love and support of her in ways that
Totally.
um that aren't where they should be at times. Like she doesn't know how to support Maddie in the way Maddie needs to be supported, but
She's
her
so
intentions
solid.
are she's trying. And she's always trying. And so this is hard. This is a hard diagnosis. And so this family is grappling with like how do we do this? How much freedom and trust does Maddie get? You know, and keep her safe. And
Totally.
how much can we trust? Can we trust her to go and travel and be a comedian on the road?
Totally. Especially with that
Um,
rejection and there's the depression. Like there's so much at stake. So like the
there's
fact that
so
she
much
is
at
this
stake.
comedian, oh no, my heart, I loved the mom. I was like,
I'm so glad.
go mom, like you're doing the best you can. Like
Yeah,
this is hard to
yeah,
navigate. No, I thought she was great. All right, let's just talk about Taylor Swift.
yeah.
What did
Okay.
she mean to Maddie? And
hmm
what's your
What does she mean
connection
to
or
me?
what does she mean to you?
Yeah. So, okay, so to let folks in on a little bit. So like, yeah, when Maddie is manic or when anyone is manic with bipolar 1, you can have delusions of grandeur where you're very special and important in some way and you believe it. You believe that you are starting a new government or you're you're a rock star or you're um being called by God to do something or you're starting a company. It can be any number of things. But I was like, well, I've got a suburban white girl like living in Connecticut. Like she thinks she knows Taylor Swift. She believes that she is going to be writing Taylor Swift's memoir when she's manic, and that they have a special relationship. So I picked Taylor Swift early on, but interestingly, I began this book so far back. It's been a while. Um, that I actually had decided to set the book. I began the book researching the book in 2020, and I actually had originally decided to set the book from 2018 to 2020, just prior to the pandemic, because I didn't want anybody wearing masks at the comedy clubs, or the comedy clubs closed
Ah,
down.
yeah.
But I stopped. I hit the pause button on writing this book, and then wrote the nonfiction book. Remember, I
Oh,
snuck in a
yeah.
nonfiction book.
Yes, which you talked about on the show, and I can link that in the show
Okay,
notes.
so
Yeah.
I kind of snuck in a book like while I was writing this bipolar book. So I wrote the
Okay.
nonfiction book, and then I returned to the bipolar book. And now pandemic is over. And I know, because publication takes long, like when you finish a book and then there's editing and you have to wait 6 months to publish it. I'm like, oh, I can actually set this in real time after the pandemic, and I've got enough space, because this story takes covers about 18 months to 2 years.
Right.
So, okay, so now the story's post pandemic. And now that means I have to include the Eras tour. So, so I had to do some reworking and rewriting and incorporating more of Taylor's work. And so Evermore and Folklore hadn't been out when I started it. And then Midnight's hadn't been out yet. And of course, the Tortured Poets Department hadn't been out yet. So there's a ton of music that hadn't been written or released when I started, and only 2020. So this woman's amazing. So I always liked Taylor Swift, but I hadn't ever really done a deep dive on her in any real way. I'm in love with her.
Ah,
She is amazing.
she's
I think she's a
phenomenal.
genius. She's phenomenal. Her lyrics, Michelle. Oh my God, she takes my breath away. Like her turns of phrase, her metaphors, her references, her feminism, her ability to capture emotion and meaning. Ah, and so
Totally.
succinctly, like her economy of language, of course, because she's got, she doesn't have 300 pages, she has a song. I'm just in awe. And she's just a beautiful human and an entertainer and performer and musician. And so, yeah, I took my two daughters to the Eras tour at Gillette Stadium
Fun.
in the beginning of the tour. And then the tour went on so long, and now I'm like invested and a Swiftie for real. My older daughter and I tried to see her again in Austria,
Oh,
but it was canceled.
yeah.
And then we regrouped and we got tickets for Toronto. So yeah, I mean, I've been
You're
all
literally
in.
a Swiftie now.
Yeah,
You
I
are.
am. If I could go to more Taylor Swift concerts, I would. So let me just tell you, like, her concerts, in addition to it, just, it's 3.5 hours of unbelievable performance, and everybody's on their feet singing and dancing the whole time. It is to be in a stadium of 50,000, mostly women and girls, who are all there because they love, and it's joy, and
Beautiful.
it's safe. And it's safe. Like, you, and even just leaving the stadium after, it's like the police officers are all like handing out their friendship bracelets, and you're
So
exchanging, and
cute.
they're relaxed. Like, there's not going to be vandalism or crimes committed or people arrested. And there aren't. Like, it's just safe. Right? Imagine a
Yeah, she's
world
such a
where,
great role
if
model.
a world were full of Swifties, it would be a pretty nice
Well, I
place.
think the world is full of
It
Swifties.
kind of
I
is.
wish I do regret not
Yeah.
having gotten
So,
tickets for my daughter and I for this
it
one.
was an
Next one.
experience. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it was really fun. I didn't know that this decision would be so life-changing when I said, "Oh, I'll have her, her delusions be that she knows Taylor Swift." That was the decision, and I didn't know how much joy that would bring into my own personal life.
That's so beautiful. And that's
Yeah.
part of the joy of the writing you do. All right, I have to ask you this. With all of the things you've studied for the books you've done and everything, how has it impacted how you live? Like, have you changed anything about the way you nurture yourself, the way you move, like anything? Because I can't imagine you reading all this stuff. And I don't know. I'm just curious. Like,
I prioritize sleep.
yeah,
I would say that's one of the biggest things. Like, it's in everything that I've written, it kind of that's been kind of a through line that
interesting.
that are and if you look at DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, like any behavioral disorder, anything classified as mental illness, one of the causes and triggers and one of the symptoms for I would say every single thing in there is sleep disturbances,
Wow.
or impairments of sleep. So bad sleep hygiene. So and I just know also with all my work on memory and Alzheimer's, if you want to
Totally.
try to prevent Alzheimer's, if you want to have a good memory for what happened today, um, sleep is essential. So, I really try to prioritize it. It doesn't mean I always get it, but like I will consciously think, like, could I get to bed a half an hour earlier tonight?
Mm.
I kind of like get excited if I can get a little more sleep. So I shoot
Yeah.
for 7 to 9 hours a night, and I like to get 9. Um,
Yeah. I do
yeah.
too. I don't. Not during the week, but maybe on a weekend. Do you track it with like a or anything or
I
no?
don't have that ring, no. And I've been thinking that it would be fun to have one to actually track it because I do like tracking my steps. Like anything that you all can do to like be engaged in your brain health and your heart health or any kind of health. It's actually fun to be engaged in it and to know that you have agency. But I knock on wood, just like I sleep, I prioritize it and I get about 9 hours
That's
if
awesome.
I'm
And you
home.
sleep through, you have good sleep.
I do now. Going into menopause, I did not. It was a train wreck for a little while, and I was like, I can't live like this. And so I got the hormone patch. I got an
Yeah.
estradiol patch, and
Yeah.
that saved my butt. Yeah, that
Oh,
saved
good.
me.
Oh, yeah.
Um, which interestingly, I'm writing a movie next.
You're ready. Wait, you're
I'm
going
writing a
right to
movie.
movie?
I've
Okay,
been
tell us.
I've been hired by James Brown and another producer named Nikki. He did Still Alice, and he and I are also doing Inside the O'Briens. So I wrote the script for that,
Nice. Oh my
and he
God, good for you, because that's a different kind of
yeah.
writing. I know
So
that
he
from other
asked.
authors.
So right. So I have written the one script, and I worked on it with him, and I'm actually talking to the director next week.
Oh, this
So
is fun.
we're working on that, but they've hired me to write a movie about menopause.
What? Oh my goodness, that's
Yeah,
huge.
it's huge. I'm super excited because I'm
Oh
like
my
living
goodness.
it. And it's just, yeah,
Totally.
it's, so much of it is,
Gosh, it's so
you
nice to
know,
see how much awareness there is around it now, too.
right? I mean, it's totally
Totally.
up my alley because there are a lot of brain changes that happen
Totally.
with menopause, totally, as you know.
Yeah,
And there's so much stigma attached to it. And there's like, it's
true.
becoming much better, but no one used to talk about this. And my
Literally
mother
no
certainly
one.
didn't. And
No.
so it's up my alley and it's going to be a dramedy.
Oh,
And
good.
yeah, so that's what I'm going to be starting that's my next project.
Oh my gosh, I was going to ask you. That's okay. So excited for that. And thank you for sharing with my audience. They're going to be so looking forward to that because we've covered that on the show a lot. And the
Yeah,
women have
I
been
know you
like,
have.
thank you. Like, oh, I wish I had this
Yeah.
information 10 years ago. I'm still in perimenopause. I'll be 54 in a few weeks. And
Yeah, I thought I was done. This is getting off topic and personal,
yeah,
but I don't care.
yeah, we can cut it out. No, I don't
I
know.
hadn't had my, that's fine. Had my period in 11 months and it made an appearance
Stop.
in
It's like you
September.
think start the clock.
Yeah,
Oh, for
right. So
goodness
here we go.
sakes. Oh,
Because
for
you're not
goodness
officially done
sakes.
until it's 12 months out. So,
Exactly. Although I
right.
think there's supposed to be some benefits of that with the estrogen and anyway, but so maybe that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
So anything I didn't ask today that you want to make sure that the women take away from this conversation?
No, I don't think so. I think you did great. Thank you. I'm so grateful for how excited you are about the story. You've
I
given me
love
so
it so
much
much. You
confidence.
are you kidding me? So you know that I just have so much respect for you. I love, like I said, you're living your purpose. Like you are so divinely put on this planet to do just what you're doing, and you do it so beautifully. And I'm just always amazed by the stories. I'm like, where how does she weave this? And like I said, all of the characters and the way they come together and the way you feel about them. And like, you just take us on this amazing journey. And then also, clearly, I told you I had to go for a walk. Like, it really does hit home. It really makes you feel something. It makes you awaken. And why are we here if not to awaken
Yeah.
more to each other, to humanity, to like appreciating and loving each other, like you said, and not everyone wants to go on that normal path. And good for Maddie to go become the comedian and to navigate, the bipolar and, go on that journey. So I just love it. Everyone's going to pick up a copy. I'm going to hold it up again for those who are going to watch it on YouTube. It's More or Less Maddie. It's a beautiful cover, by the way. I don't know if you have
Thank
anything
you.
to do with that, but
They did. They did a good job.
I think they did a beautiful job.
Yeah.
And it's when this interview airs, it'll be out. So pick up a copy, share this interview with a friend, because again, your work is to create the awareness and the empathy. And so just from this conversation, people are going to learn so much. I didn't know anything about bipolar disorder other than a lot of those misconceptions that are out there. And that's not
Right.
fair for people who are living with it.
No, and it separates us, right?
It
It's the I
separates
could because
us.
I think the misinformation that's out there about it, it's a snap judgment. It's like, oh, he's crazy, or oh, I can't trust her. I'm gonna write her off because she's got bipolar, or she is bipolar. And
Right.
so, thank you
Yeah.
so much, Michelle. Yes, I hope this book does a lot to create a compassionate understanding, some some kindness and grace around depressive episodes and manic episodes, and invites conversation about something people were too afraid to talk about before.
Too afraid, but now you've opened the door, just like with menopause. I think when somebody's brave enough to have their platform, you wrote a whole book, like to get the story out. I love the fact that you do it through a story versus nonfiction. I mean, what makes you so special too. It just invites conversation. And then also somebody goes, wow, you saw me. Like now people can understand and maybe they won't judge me so much. Like now they're
Yeah.
going to have this compassion for what I'm going through and it'll open up more dialogue. So thank you for being you, for the work that you do. It's fun. This is the fourth interview we've done. I'll list all of them in the show notes because anything that Lisa's done is awesome. You just need to listen. I love them all. I'll link the very first one too because that was a great interview. And that you told us about your writer's journey and how you went from neuroscientist to New York Times best-selling fiction author, which is also in and of itself, that itself could be its own movie. Like your story. No, it could.
That's great.
It's
Thank you.
true. You know I'm a fan, Lisa.
I
So
know, I
much
know.
love to you. Enjoy New
Thank
York.
you.
It
Back
sounds
at
so
you.
fun. And enjoy the comedy. We all need to laugh more anyway. So
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you very, very much. Yeah, and
lots of love.
tell everybody about the book, read the book.
Yes, go get the book today and definitely share this interview. Bye, love.
Bye. Thank you.
Hey, friend, I have one request before we sign off today. If you've gained any value from any of the interviews that you've tuned into, would you take just 1 minute and leave a 5-star rating and review over on Apple Podcasts? It's actually how more women can find the show, and I want to continue growing a community of women who are loving themselves and living full on. So thank you for all of your support, and I look forward to being back with you next week. Bye for now.
This podcast is presented for entertainment and educational purposes only. Any information provided is not intended to be a substitute for medical, mental health, or other professional advice. Seek out your trusted healthcare provider or other qualified professional for all matters dealing with your health and well-being. Any opinions or information provided by a guest are their own and not those of Michelle Lamoureux or the company.